Okay, well, hopefully everyone is still doing okay. I know this is getting old, but for better for worse, obviously we're about to open up our state partly, um, and I'm sure everyone's ready, even though it's not really ready probably. And I've tried my best to try to keep these assignments sort of different, so you're not doing the same thing over and over again necessarily, while trying to maintain some kind of academic something, but trying to take it a little bit easy on you so you can do your other work and deal with your other things. So, what I wanted to talk about today quickly was what happens after World War One. Now, there's several delays. The war ends in 1918, and there's several delays before a peace conference could be held. Part of it was the war ended in November. It was elections in Britain and the U.S., so they wanted to hold off till there was a peace conference. Christmas came. Nobody wanted to meet during Christmas. It wasn't until 1919 that we have a peace conference. The problem with that, in a way, is that by this point, the Austrian Empire has already started to split up into separate countries. Anyway, in 1919, the Paris Peace Conference was assembled. And I want to say a little bit about who was there, kind of like we did with the Congress of Vienna way back when. So representing the U.S. is President Wilson, Woodrow Wilson. From Britain, we have David Lloyd George, who is the Prime Minister. His last name is Lloyd George, but it's not hyphenated. From France, we have George Clemenceau. We have Orlando from Italy, and there are Japanese representatives there as well because Japanese fought on what we call the Allied side, which is what I'd just given you. I want to say a little bit about each of these people and sort of pluses and minuses and what they were thinking about and so on. I have to tell you that up front, I am not a big fan of President Wilson. I think he was idealistic too much, and I think he was unrealistic. He wanted everything to be done democratically, but that meant his way because the U.S., of course, was a democracy. He's a very, very inflexible negotiator, and if the people at the conference were not talking about something he was interested in, he just really wasn't paying much attention. And his major priority was this idea of a League of Nations. Nextly, we have David Lloyd George from Britain. Like I said, he's the prime minister, very solid, very capable diplomat. And his major concern was wanting to keep control of the seas because, of course, Britain still had the strongest navy. David Lloyd George and the British didn't want to punish Germany too harshly because they wanted Germany to be able to buy British products. Now, the oldest representative at the conference was from France, and that was George Clemenceau. And he wanted Germany punished as harshly as possible. France had suffered the most during the war. And we can't forget, this is the second time the French have been through this. I mean, we had the Franco-Prussian War, remember, and then here's World War I. So the French have had enough with the Germans. Nextly, I mentioned Orlando from Italy, decent politician, but he's treated as kind of like a second-class citizen at the conference. And the only thing he really cares about is that he had been promised land by the Allies to join their side. And that's all he cares about. He wants the territory that he'd been promised. He's not treated well, and at one point he actually walks out. The Italian delegation literally has their bags packed, but they drag him back, and Italy later will get some little strips of territory, but not what they were promised. And the Japanese are really just concerned with getting German colonies in the Pacific. Well, the peace conference starts off badly when Wilson refused to talk about anything else except for this League of Nations, which was supposed to be like the old Congress system, kind of an advisory group that was designed to keep the peace. And out of respect for Wilson, and because he wouldn't go on to talk about anything else, everybody sort of signed on to the Congress, even though they weren't really that interested in it. Eventually, though, peace conference does produce a treaty with Germany, and I should mention to you that the Paris Peace Conference is the peace conference with just Germany. The other, what we call central powers, will have their own peace conferences. So the treaty that comes out of this Paris Peace Conference is called the Versailles Treaty. And the main provisions are as follows. And just kind of be thinking about each of these in terms of, how are the Germans going to react? Is this something that they accept? Is it a surprise? Is it a shocking surprise? Whatever. Okay. So first main provision of the Versailles Treaty is that the territories of Alsace and Lorraine go back to France. And these had been won in the Franco-Prussian War, and the French won them back. And if I remembered, I attached a little map to this so you could see what we're talking about. The Versailles Treaty also called for a demilitarized Rhineland. Now, the Rhine River is the border between France and Germany, and the area on the German side of the border is called the Rhineland. And so German military can't have anything in that area. German army itself was limited to 100,000 long-term enlistees, which is just not a large army, and they could only have a very small navy. They can't have any submarines, and there can't be any planes, literally. No planes in Germany. And Germany had to become a democracy. So think about each of those provisions that we just mentioned, and just think a little bit about who you think put each of those into the treaty. And I'm going to stop here and go on to a part 2.